which one to use.
So for our closing session, Abe, thanks you all for your patience over the last 2 days as we've gone through some amazing content. I am going to hand you over to our amazing facilitators for this session. We have Dan Garcia from UC Berkeley. Is there anyone here who doesn't know Dan? Everybody knows Dan. There. And we have Stephanie Santoso. Stephanie, again, I think most people here would know her. Stephanie used to be the former policy advisor on making at the White House and has actually made the original connection to Adam and has been a great supporter of ours. And John, for everybody here who took the fantastic design thinking sessions yesterday, and I will hand it over to them and let them introduce themselves further before we dive into the content of the session.
Great. Why don't you start? You got the mic. Oh, wait, we all have mics.
Oh, just because I have the handheld mic. Okay. Yeah, so I think Kaustav gave a pretty robust introduction, and I know we only have about 25 minutes, maybe? Okay. We can go long. All right. So one of the things that I love about this topic, so the topic of this session is success in a digital world, right, is that it's really broad. And so one of the things that, with it being the last day of the conference, one of the real things that I think would be great to hear about in this session from you all is to think about what are the things that were those light bulb moments throughout the conference that we're going to take away with us, and to really think about how do we actually operationalize those in some way. How might we actually design a method for taking those back to our communities and having that make an impact in the work that we're doing. So one example that I would give for me in terms of a light bulb moment was this idea that you don't want to just solve any problem, right? I think that no one would argue that there are many problems in the world to solve, but finding the wrong problem, solving, I think Brand Farron said this yesterday, was solving the solution or finding the solution to a wrong problem, not super productive, right? So that's one takeaway for me. John, do you want to talk a little bit more about something that you found to be interesting or
maybe two things. And so I think what we want to maybe where she's going is seed the conversation with things that stood out to us.
Yep.
You know, I think I would call out two things. First is, I love the title. It's general, but it's loaded. Like, what does success look like in a digital world? That sounds like predict the future. And one quote I remember from a day, it feels like a blur, day and a half ago, is you can't predict the future, but you can invent it. Right? But I know that everybody chases invention, which by definition is unexpected, so how do you do that? Right, so I think if we could be a bit designful how we sneak up on that, that's maybe the hope for the guide for the conversation. So that would be one quote that stood out. The other one, man, Adam was full of them. Right. And I wrote down a couple, but one that I really liked is the thrill of finding the edge of our knowledge and our omnipotence. And I think that's where we are. So that's what stood out to me. Yeah. What we do with that, I'm not sure yet. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So one of the keynotes yesterday talked about where you are in the curve, and the smart aleck says we're here, and the person says we're here. I think we're so at the base of the curve. We have so far to go. And so one of the things, I mean, we're moving. I see, if I look at the university space, there's an interest in computing that I've never seen before. We're having the largest classes. Stanford has 95% of their undergraduates taking computer science. It's now the most popular subject for many people. So it's working. Like the ball moved. A long time ago, Hadi said, look, the reason this is going to be easy, this is maybe when I first met him 7 years ago, when he first started, before Hour of Code, before any of that, it wasn't even a video. A video was in his mind. He said, all the economics point toward this being something we can do. Right? It's good for jobs, it's good for kids, all those things. It's not like climate change where sometimes the economics fight against it. The ball should roll down the hill easier than you think. So when we get this rolling and there's kind of a tipping point, it's going to be very, very exciting. So
the curve isn't like this then. The curve is like this. And we're about here. It's like, yeah. And it gets bigger. Yeah.
So I'm excited to get to that tipping point. So we're not even close to where that is. But some classes are getting to that point at some universities where everyone's taking it. And here's the other key to it. It's not required. right? People are doing it because they want to be there. So that's another piece that you may have to have some requirement in the early stage, but a long term, I don't want to have requirements for taking a CS class. I think it should be something that's like, oh, yes, what you do. It's just what you do, not having to even talk about it, right? The temperature is good when you don't talk about it. So when things are healthy, so what does success mean for me? You don't have to have meetings of how do we fix it, because it just works. It's awesome, and momentum is there. We're past the tipping point. Things are good. We have to even have an Asian boys code club, because not enough Asian boys are coding, right? So I would like to see us way past the tipping point. So success, the other worry about it is the big mission accomplished too early, right? We've seen that before. So I want to make sure that we don't put the mission accomplished sign up until way down the road when it's really healthy and the ecosystem is there and the demographics are incredibly diverse. Everyone feels access. There's a makerspace in every library. Like that should be what mission accomplished banner day is, not when we think we've crossed some 25% of the, no, it's when everything is it's in the ethos. CS is in every class. It's just a little taste of it. It's just infused everywhere.
And I think
as soon as mission is accomplished, like we saw Santana last night, you go right into the next song, the next mission, right? It's like, boom,
right.
That'd be brilliant.
I think also keeping in mind as we talk about CS for all, right? Why? Right? It's not CS for all because we expect that every student that takes a CS class is going to become a computer scientist, and that's what they will do for a living, right? And Kaustav's because we had a conversation about this, right? Because in the end, what CS, the real inherent value, in my opinion, is that it enables somebody to have acquire a certain way of thinking about the world, right? Whether it's computational logic, and it should be thought of as a way of that CS can bring a way of living and a way of thinking to a student, and not that it's just all about career, and it's not all about jobs, and it doesn't mean that just because you have students taking computer science that they're immediately going to become you're going to be churning out computer scientists, right, in the next generation. And for some, it may be that they want, but I think that's a really important point to keep in mind.
So can we maybe use that as just the warm-up to push the conversation out here?
Great, sure.
So again, our hunch of how to talk into this is not try to invent the future. And do you mind if I step down? I feel very uncomfortable up on stage. Maybe it's just the thinking things like there's one model learning, right? Sage on stage. Yeah.
I will stay up because I'm short, and then you'll be the same. Yeah, it's better this way. I like it.
Totally works.
I'm just going to
Get the shot now. Get the shot.
It's my
We do it in the session, not after the
only
session.
chance to be tall ever.
You're getting a picture of him taking a picture of us, right? Great.
There we go. Okay.
So wait. Wow.
Okay.
Now I want to stand up.
It's my chance to be tall.
Okay. So the way we imagine this is maybe 2 chapters. Before we just think all the way to it, first just crystallize those insights that we picked up on from listening to people in domains other than our own that we think might change how we think about the problems we're solving, the problems worth solving, or how we might solve them, which is a little prototype what we ran next door. But should we just maybe see what comes up?
Yeah.
Do we ask people to grab mics because we are
Are we allowed to throw them, or do we have to? Okay.
So raise your hand and the mic will come to you. Don't talk.
Then I will try to
Don't talk.
capture some of
Here we go.
them.
There's a mic right here. Go.
Oh no,
Perfect.
I'm stuck up here.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, thank you. So this wasn't a learning from somebody else outside our community, but this was Jane Margolis yesterday. I don't see her here today, but it relates to the mission accomplished, and it's scale fast, learn slow. And that her point was that we're scaling so fast that we're not taking time to reflect and learn and think about what we're actually learning and share that widely.
Right.
I want to build on that. I've been thinking a lot about failure and the importance and the message about making mistakes and failing, and that's okay. And I think that's really important in a low-stakes environment. But I am really worried about the concept of failure when we're talking high stakes and scaling, and the kids who are most affected by our failure to scale and particularly who gets left behind in the scale-up process, so low-income kids and students of color. And so what does it mean for us as a community to embark on this journey and be repeating the memes of failure is okay, scale big, break shit along the way, which is really, really important when there's low stakes. And so my question is, and my thought is, what happens when the stakes are so high? What does that mean for failure?
Love it. That makes me think of the failure CV, and that life is messy. So I'm just going to jot that down.
So I just wanted to raise a question that I've had throughout the whole conference. I was more in the maker sessions and not the computer science for all sessions, and I'm sure this point was brought up, but it relates to failure, high stakes testing, blah, blah, blah. You know, in New York City schools, there's like such an emphasis on, oh my God, a kid's got to pass the test. A little of that pressure is off now because of some adjustments that have been made. But because of that pressure that's always on children and teachers too, succeed is not about failure at all. It's about getting the level 1s to 2s to 3s to 4s. And children just like hate school. Not all of them, but boy, you know, I run into so many kids who are so turned off by this constant grind and pressure. And then I think about the pilot program that's going into place for New York City schools with coding and people talking about computer science for all. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is just like one more thing that we're going to be shoving down kids' throats. And they're going to learn to hate it. So, you know, the question that I'm posing is, how do we solve that problem? Like, how do we make it fun for children? How do they get excited about it? Like, when I do making in the schools, I think that, like, my great success point has been that there's no outcome attached to the program that I bring into schools. We just have fun all day long. And because of it, it's been very successful. So how do we do that with computer science for all as it starts to roll into my school district and school districts across the country?
Does anybody in the room have any experiences they want to share in response to that?
Well, you know, to play off of this a little bit, and it was one of the conversations I was having with John last night, is to take it from hands-on to hands-on, minds-on. That it's not simply enough that we're engaging the students, because we also want them to learn something along the way. And so, you know, how can we create a space that is engaging, but also thoughtful and engaging not only physically, but mentally as well, and then it becomes very purposeful. Because I think that purposefulness is really key to helping the students actually learn and grow mentally as well as being engaged physically.
There's a really good, that makes me think of a piece that Richard Sennett, a sociologist, wrote called The Craftsman. It's a book that he wrote that talks about the marrying of the hands and the mind, and how working with your hands, it could be anything from programming at breadboard to making bread, could actually help you to learn, right? It codifies the process, and I think there's many other people that have talked about that. But
So my reaction to how to make it not unenjoyable, make it really passionate for the kids, is let them have choice. You know, if you tell every kid make a chair, just to use Adam's example, every kid makes a chair, there's going to be 5 kids who are going to say, why am I doing that? I don't want to make a chair. I want to make a table. I want to make a box. I want to make something, a race car. So it's about, at all opportunities you can do, if you can, it's the same, it's the curse of education, it's that we use the same yardstick. I have to be able to measure you all, so here's a yardstick and you all have to stand up to the yardstick. If there's a way to kind of evaluate them in their own, like, where did you start, where did you come from? Choose your own project, and we're going to have a general template of how we're going to grade you, and then go and do this. And in the CS Principles course, the new AP course is coming by, there was a dialogue on the development committee. I'll give you a little bit of how that sausage was made, of should we have a list of projects that kids could choose from? Because the kids will come and say, I don't know what to do. And teachers are saying, what do I tell the kids who have no idea? We say, keep pushing on them until they come up with something themselves. So there was 2 camps. There was one, do you give them a list, and one is no list. And the no list won. And I think that's the best decision. That one of the key things that happened is because there's now no list, kids can choose anything they want. It's not like, well, what if what I'm passionate about is not on the list? Well, it is, because there's no list. So you can now do anything you want. And that's the key. You let the kids choose what they want, and then in every moment when they're building it, they're engaged. So it's really, and as for the educators in the room, as much as you can, take this back home and take away the one-size-fits-all. I'm an anti-nifty person. There's a movement in the CS education space to have nifty assignments that say, here's a nifty assignment you give to everybody. I am so anti-nifty, because as much as that was exciting to 98% of the kids, there's 2% that say, I hate that. Why are we doing that? Because it's the same yardstick. So throw away all the nifty assignments and let the kids choose what they want to do, and you're going to have engagement by everybody. By everybody. Nifty assignments is a movement that folks to collect great projects. And so I'm an anti, even though one of my projects is on the list, I did this. I saw, I got the coffee, I got the lemonade now, and I'm anti-nifty. You shouldn't have nifty projects. You should just have kids do whatever they want to do with some ideas of what has been done in the past from last year, but kids should be able to choose whatever they want at all times. Yeah.
So I just want to comment on the student engagement piece. I really think that a key element to this is taking students out of the classroom and into tech companies. So a lot of the work that we've been doing in Los Angeles is, how do we engage local tech companies and providing company tours and providing project-based learning on company sites. And we realize the difference that it makes for students. So a lot of the students we work with are low income. They're from East LA, the downtown Pico area. They're from the Valley, and Silicon Beach is 16 miles away. But for some of these students, it might as well be 1,000 miles away. Wow. So they've never had an interaction with someone who works in tech. Their only interaction has been what they find on Facebook or on their app. So when you put them into the context, like bringing them into Snapchat, and they're working side by side with Snapchat marketers and designers to build the geo filter, and you run a pre and post survey where they were like, 2 of them were excited about tech, and then 10 of them are excited right after because they just see the difference. They're in Venice, they're hanging out. I mean, all of those elements add to the excitement and the engagement of students and actually the practical application, because now they have someone that they can inspire to. So what we are really focused on, and again, like just for context, working at the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, we're really focused on that employer engagement piece, because that has been really critical to a lot of our career pathway students, where we walk into classrooms and students are not really genuinely engaged. They're curious, but when you take them outside and you start working with them and you bring them with tech folks, like it changes their perspective on what this means for a potential career afterwards.
That's a great point. There's a lot of mountaintops you can't see until you've climbed to the earlier mountaintop. Like if you're kind of scared like that, you can't get away, you have to get to there. And then once you climb the next one, then you see another one that you couldn't see before. So a lot of these opportunities are things that the kids could never even realize that they can see themselves there. Love it. Love it.
We ready?
Hey.
Yeah. I work for a nonprofit in a state that is trying, and I think succeeding, in accelerating advanced placement. So AP has become the core messaging vehicle for us. And clearly the new CSP course is an on-ramp that we've never had before. I think it's very worthwhile. One of the lessons over 10 years is really understanding that voluntary approach, not a mandate. If you want to go big, you want to go high, apply to us. We have funding, we have infrastructure. You run the program, but you have to voluntarily be ready to go for that rigor, particularly for low-income students and minorities. It's not just it's more low-income, more minority students. And so as we've been building our infrastructure for computer science and really reaching out and understanding and riding the coattails of Beauty and Joy and so many others, and the messaging, the public messaging of code.org and so many others, of a comment I've been haunted by as we roll out and try and figure out how do we scale fast, is what messaging do we have for parents who are the ones perhaps guiding the student to say, go and sign up for computer science. Don't just wait for somebody to assign you to the class. Go ask for it. It's every district in our state, every school in our state sets their own curriculum. Who's asking for computer science either to be embedded within courses or to have it among their course offerings. So my message is, where's the messaging for parents? Help me, because I don't have the money to create top quality kind of messaging. But I don't want to underestimate the value of the family and whatever that structure might be in getting this movement to success, however we measure that. There are a lot of different ways to measure that, but I don't want to underestimate the value of messaging for parents that I think we're all overlooking sometimes.
There's a group putting together messaging about exactly that, and I believe the website is LeadCS. Ruthie, help me with this. Is that right? LeadCS.org? So the answer is leadcs.org. They're actually charged with doing exactly that, messaging in superintendents and parents why CS is important. So check out leadcs.org. And correct me if that's the wrong one, but I think that's right.
On the message, just to follow up, is Jane or Ruthie here from NC WIT? Okay, you guys, did you want to say something about the college counselor? I think that's one of the answers.
Make sure you get the mic.
Yeah, to this messaging.
Yeah. So NCWIT Counselors for Computing is available to everyone, and Jane is the project manager on that, and she's here somewhere. And Counselors for Computing has all kinds of messaging for parents, has messaging for teachers, has messaging for students and counselors, and posters and handouts, everything that they need. And we really are trying to form sort of a relationship between the person teaching computer science and the counselor in that school so that they're helping each other. And it is boys and girls, it's gender neutral, but it is designed to let counselors know that maybe they could suggest computing to a girl. You want to say anything, Jane?
Oh, well, and just one quick resource is we have talking points cards that help others speak with confidence about computer science and what it is and who it's for, which is everybody. And so sometimes it's us just sort of being the agent for making those connections between the computer science teacher to the counselor, from the counselor to parents, counselors to kids. And so, we have resources and programs for that. So.
And any of you can order quantities of NCWIT resources. They are printed, they're beautiful and shiny, and they look good. And you can order them from us, and we will send them to whatever event you're having, or if you want to just have them on hand to distribute to people.
We've talked about bottom-up and top-down approaches, and the best approach I've seen is the bottom-up, where the students are screaming for, I want CFs in my school. And the way you get that is you have a really outstanding ECS or CS Principles course, and the last day you have an auditorium where there's the what do they call the meetings where the whole school gets it? Assembly. You have an assembly. Keep playing that. You have an assembly, and it's been that many years from high school. Yeah. So you have an assembly, and you have people who say, you know what, I've never programmed before this one, and here's what I did. Here's what the two of us did. And boom, you do some demo, and the little brothers and sisters and friends go like, that can be me. The whole idea of that can be me when I go to the tech schools, that can be me. And so that's the way next year you have a unbelievable turnout of a diverse group of kids because they see themselves on stage that next year too. Mark.
If I can, I have 2 points, and I'd like to come back to the failure idea. So when I was up on stage and talking with Adam, he had mentioned a TED Talk video where the girls were asked to code, and 2 hours later they had blank screens because they were too afraid to do something and not have it work. And they didn't want to have things not work right. And I think creating that freedom to fail, and as I've talked to different teachers in this role, I've heard that same kind of comment where the teachers they don't want to do something and not have it work, but that's part of computer science. I mean, debugging, things don't work, and having the teachers be able to be comfortable with that and have the students be comfortable with that, I think that's really important, which actually, I wanted to follow up on Julie's comment. My prior life, in part before I came to CSTA, my academic area was looking at how educational institutions and government organizations fail to respond to large-scale technology-based change, and particularly when they fail to respond, why do they fail to respond? And one of the things that happens there's a feedback loop which happens, but particularly when you're what we call the strategic imperative gap, that the difference between what you have to accomplish and where you're at.
how that weighs, the larger that is, it creates all these maladaptive behaviors. It can lead to escalating commitment to a failing course of action. And so if you say we can't fail, when failure is not an option, you greatly increase the odds that you will not be successful. And you'll get into a trap where you'll go far beyond the point where everybody knows you cannot succeed. But there's all these psychological, structural, organizational, all these factors which will keep things going. So there has to be actually a mechanism, I think, which allows us to fail. And part of what the research will show in that is that the organizations who are able to get out of that trap are the ones who focus on, there's another little capabilities gap there, and it's actually just called the capabilities gap. It's really focused on, do you have the actual skills required to close the strategic gap? And so one of those things we have to look at is, what do we need to actually make that gap get smaller, that strategic imperative gap? What do we actually need for skills and capabilities? What's missing? What's there? What's strong? What's not? If we can close that lower gap, the strategic imperative gap will close. If we don't focus on that lower one, the strategic gap will just keep getting larger. And again, you'll get that escalating commitment. So it makes me nervous when we say we cannot fail. I think we can't fail over the long term, but we have to actually have a mechanism to be able to not be afraid to fail at some parts.
Mike, sorry.
I'll give you
Going back to the messaging, do you want to comment to that?
Well, I just wanted to riff off that because I feel like there's this pendulum that's swinging where there's success and then there's failure. And yeah, it's okay to fail, but I don't want that to be like the end game. I want success to be there. I want children to feel like they can be a success and not always this, okay, honey, it's okay if you fail. Well, failure is a good learning experience, but what about being successful? Successful is awesome. You know, it feels really great when you accomplish the thing that you've set out to do. So I just don't want the pendulum to swing so far that it's like failure, failure, failure.
Just on that point,
Mike, you got it.
Anybody following Angela Duckworth's work on grit, like helping to instill grit in kids, and Carol Dweck talking about a growth mindset. I mean, we need to scaffold experiences so that kids can anticipate failure and know how to deal with it, and that they need to have just like we were talking about today, you fail until you succeed, and that's part of the process, and make that a normal part of it and an acceptable part of it. So just if I don't know if everybody is in the education game, but those are just two people who are just really working on kind of a profound level around this issue around failure.
Right there, yeah.
Going back to the messaging, something that floated for me in the conversations here is messaging for industry and business. The reason we are even having this conversation is a need and a demand in the market. It seems like there's tremendous amount of pressure being placed on educators, and I think we need to be able to have a conversation about what does industry do, what can they provide to support the schools, how they can leverage their influence to remove that yardstick that we're talking about, because we all agree that it would be much better if everybody had a choice, but right now teachers have to meet those demands, and even the demands for CS for all is through standards and testing. So maybe have a more real conversation about how we can shoulder that together.
That's a great point. One way that industry has stepped forward is both in advocacy, signing the letters, the change.org piece. There's a group called TEALS, which partners volunteers at industry who want to work in high schools, and they get partnered as a kind of co-teacher together, that they go through a 2-year experience, and it's a great way for the volunteerism in industry to kind of kick its way up. But also for them to say, this is an important thing, we need to have CS and advocate as much as they can in the local districts as well. Yeah, a lot of places they can move forward.
So one way that we in Rhode Island are starting to address that question is moving beyond the idea of this new initiative that we launched as not an initiative. And so we launched a program called CS for Rhode Island, riffing off CS for All, and the intention is to have computer science offered in every public school by the end of 2017. So ambitious goal, but we've really tried to make the messaging about how this is a departure from the way that we've traditionally thought about computer science education in the state as a nice to have, and really moving both into this this mindset of a need to have, but also beyond that, and how this is the role of industry in our state. This is the role of educators. This is the role of government, and it's more than that collaborative approach. It's about thinking how we develop problem solvers and how we really instill these fundamental principles into the K-12 landscape. And that looks different for different schools and different kids at different times, and not everyone is starting from the same place, but that it's critically important that we are constantly iterating on what that process looks like and seeing this more as a process rather than this is the plan that we have and we have to stick to the plan and this is our Gantt chart and we're moving along at this defined pace. And that can be a challenging thing for government to say, hey, we don't know that this is exactly going to work out the way we have planned, but we're committed to the goal and the strategies that we're using to get there. And if, as we decide that, hey, there's a gap in our pathway, we need to fill that, we're committed to making those choices and constantly, using that process. So I think that's one way that we've tried to address that challenge, and I'm really excited to see what everyone else is doing and how we can continue to work collaboratively to better understand how we transform that mindset.
I think, and something that you touched upon that I think is really important too, is this idea of being agile, but also sharing as you go along, sharing and distributing what you within your community, within your state, are doing with others, in this room, but obviously beyond, who are tackling the same issues, but trying to be transparent about it and to be collaborative about it, I think is really important.
We should celebrate your initiative, 2017, your entire state by 2017. But still, no, it's a smaller space, yeah. So please do put out, come to places where you can get your voice heard, like SIGC and CSTA and other places where you can say, look, this is what we tried. We're kind of on the cutting edge. We're trying to do it as fast as we can. New York has the 10-year plan. We have the 1-year plan. Here's what worked and didn't, and let's all learn from that quickly. So advocate to kind of get that message out. Wonderful. Who has the mic next?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, sure.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
So I guess I want to kind of respectfully push back on the idea of failure. I totally get what everyone is saying. I get the iterative design, I get the trying hard, I get encouraging kids to do things that are out of bounds. The word failure, however, is the worst thing that can happen to you in school, right? If we're grading, kids know what failure means. So depending on a kid to understand that minute distinction that failure is great, yay, let's all fail, F, right? They're not meta thinkers, right? They may get it, some kids may get it, and the kids who have a lot of bandwidth for failure may get it. But if you're literally an at-risk kid, telling kids to take risks and fail, I'm not sure is an appropriate message. I think it's totally fine if a kid knocks the bridge falls down and they go, epic fail, awesome. But if a teacher walks by and says fail, that has a very different meaning when your life depends on what a mark that teacher puts on your grade at the end of the semester. So as much as I think it's the right idea, I think we should be careful about the word failure in graded situations. Overcoming obstacles, challenges, all these things that people do, real scientists do, they don't set out to fail. Vince Lombardi doesn't go, let's learn a lot and lose the game. That's not real world. I mean, I don't think failure is as virtuous as the movement is making it. It makes me cringe sometimes when I hear the cheerleading about failure. And I don't have the answer because it's an easy shortcut word for what we're all talking about, but I'd like to be more thoughtful in our use of the word fail.
Right. No, words matter. Words matter. Fail means you're done. At the end of the day, it didn't work. How about this? Your program doesn't work yet. That's Carol Dweck's word, right? It's a very different way to think of the same thing, but the message to a kid means polar opposites of how the kid's going to react to those two phrases. Yeah. That's a great book. Beautiful Oops. The book Beautiful Oops. Beautiful Oops. They mentioned. That's a great point.
So let me share,
him and then you.
Let me share some, perspective. I actually agree with, the previous speaker. I've been working with a few hundred kids the last couple of years, And, so one of the things I try to focus on is the process itself, not worry about the outcome. So that's very important. So rather than use words like, failure, you never want to use any negative words. And I've been working with kids as young as 6 years old and, all the way to high school. It's very important not to use any negative words because, sometimes even as a fun thing, they'll start then telling to each other, you see that all the time with kids. So it is very important. The other thing is to really focus on the process, then worry about the outcome and say that, and another interesting thing that I encourage kids to do is, whatever you're doing, like try to write some notes, make them focus on the process by giving them the tools as to how they can focus on the process and whatever happens, and so that is the way by which, we can kind of take the focus away from whether something failed or not, because it's all a process. Whatever happens in the process. Document the process, record your observations, do whatever you can. And to me, that has actually worked real wonders. And then to set objectives or frame objectives in such a way that there is not a 1 or a 0. There is not a black or white kind of a scenario at the end of the day. So that's also important, how you frame that objective and frame that. And that actually helps even kids as young as 6 years old. So I just want to share that perspective.
Kind of the journey, not the destination of it.
Yes.
And another way to celebrate that, by the way, if you ever watched the trailers of Pixar movies, some of the early Pixar movies, they showed where kind of the eyes weren't locked to the body and the creature was to move and the eyes stay floating there and everybody laughs. And if you can almost have a big portrait of a lot of people working with logo and drawing, a lot of turtle geometry work with a lot of the early classes. Why not celebrate the ones where it screwed up? Why not have along your wall, not the ones with the prettiest pictures, but the ones that were the prettiest pictures where you try to get it working, it didn't work yet, but that's the screw up. And just have this little glommy thing on the side. Those can be beautiful. And have those as a celebration rather than the ones that worked at the end. To kind of get to that. 2 and then 3. Yeah, go 1 and 2. You're next.
I want to continue what the two people said previously, that the word failure makes me cringe. I think students, if they have a choice of picking a course where it's be failure or be success, they're going to pick success. And I think just to use the word failure is wrong. I think the word should be overcome. All right, it wasn't Martin Luther King did not say we shall fail and then we shall win. It's we shall overcome. I think that's what we should be teaching them, how to overcome.
Cynthia was next, actually, over here, if you can, and then Josh. She had her hand up before, Josh, sorry.
I've had my hand up for a while. This discussion disturbs me, as does computational thinking without programming. Now, many of you know that I started working with children in the 60s. And what we talked about were bugs and debugging. We never talked about failure. We never talked about things being wrong. We never talked about mistakes. Children became researchers and used to go around the school interviewing their friends to find out, for example, which multiplication tables were the hardest. And then they would make charts up. Nothing was a failure. It was all about debugging. And of course, many times, especially with turtle geometry on a display screen, the things that children produced startled me and them. There was a serendipitous activity. And then the explanation was, what did you do to cause it? Now, I want to change the subject slightly because I'm really focused. I feel bad for what's being planned for high school students, but I'm focused on elementary. And I thought ISTE and its suggestions were bad enough for elementary school. They went from thinking programming was too difficult to let's do Microsoft Office. And now I look at what CSTA is proposing for K1, 2, 3, 4, and I am very, very disillusioned and disappointed. And think...
For those who don't know, tell us what they're proposing that bothers you so much.
Well, it's, I can't quote it because I don't like it. But it's like, first graders should know this. Second graders should know that.
What is this? Yeah.
I can't tell you, I'll have to read it again. I read the thing and it made me nauseous. And I'm sorry that I can't tell you what this is, but saying it, that first graders ought to be responsible for knowing this. When they work with me, I'm not sure they'll know that. They'll know something else, which might serve them in better stead for what they're doing now and what they'll do later. The thing is, especially in a programming environment or in a math environment, you don't learn this now, you'll learn it later. You'll learn it when it's necessary, not because teacher says do it. And so what I want to do and have been doing and try to do is create a rich learning environment where kids can poke around with a little bit of help. They're structured. They don't know everything. I have to be, as a teacher, tell them things, but I want to tell them enough so that they can go off and explore on their own, and especially K through 8. As I said, I feel sorry for high school kids if they don't have this experience before they get to high school. So I'm very troubled by CSTA came a little late. ISTE already ruined things. And I don't know if they fight with each other because ISTE thought it was responsible for what went on in school. And then I have not, I don't know. Anyway, that's my thought.
So one thing that I picked up on from what you mentioned too that I think is really important is this idea that I think also extends into a lot of the conversations we've had around making an education is around this idea of creating an environment where it's you're creating an environment for learning in real time, not just learning just in case, but learning as students need it and as they go versus the just in case scenarios.
Right.
Okay, so I'm glad Cynthia's in the room because I don't have to put on my Brian Harvey hat and say what she just said. So Dan, you're a parent, right?
Sure.
Let's assume
I'm a maker. I have 2 kids.
Fantastic. So let's suppose you move into my district. Hey Dan, you're a parent in my district, and your kid is performing in class in such a way that I need to give you a call, and I tell you that your kid is failing. How does it make you feel?
I got some work to do.
But wait a second, isn't failure a good thing?
I mean, this obviously we're on the same page.
Well, but my point is that it's not just kids; it's parents. There's a lot of stakeholders here that aren't being discussed, and we've got this word with an extremely strong negative connotation that make people feel like they can't get things done. We can talk about overcoming stuff. I mean, I love what Jim had to say. I think overcoming is a great word. But the bottom line is, you're fighting a linguistic battle. I'm not sure you can win.
I mean, I think what Cynthia talked about is in the process, every day, there's no failing every day. There's bugs and debugging. And what you're saying is, by the end of the year's experience, or the semester's experience, they did all that stuff and they were below par. That's how I'm reading your message.
Nah, but I'm just saying that
my kid is below par. Does that mean he's not paying attention? Does that mean he's disrupting class? I mean, there's a lot of different messages when you say that word.
Okay, but the way the word is used isn't going to be as simple as the way we would like it to be used. That's thing number one. Thing number two is, riffing off of Cynthia, grades just stink. I mean, grades create perceptions that block kids and block adults from thinking clearly.
So what do you tell a kid? I agree.
Well, I can tell you what I do in my class.
You had some expectations. No grades. You had some expectations, and that kid didn't meet them. Didn't want to come in. Right. Didn't want to be there, and hopefully you get to that early. So you get to the parent. Hey, by the way, first week the kid's not really engaged. So this is the wrong class for them. But you tried, and they're just blowing you off, and they're disruptive.
But that's not even necessarily the case. That's not even necessarily the problem, right? I mean, so there are things I can control in the classroom, like I can just make grades go away, and just not tell people how I do grading. I really can, but man, I mean, I'm glad I'm tenured if I want to take that approach. No. Anyway, the point I'm trying to say is that
there are parent who's for the kid who just without grades isn't doing the right thing.
There's lots of interpretations of what this means. It's linguistically challenging. Kaustav might actually be in my district for all I know. I mean, his kid. Right. I've got her kid. I mean, the reality is that we can talk all we want about this, but your own response is pretty consistent with how most parents respond. I just think you're fighting a linguistic battle you can't win.
So I think we've captured the dimension of semantics, the dimension of perceptions, the loading of terms. I think we've separated the process from the discovery. So in as much as the richness coming out of the room, I think we got it. So I appreciate the nuance here.
Sure.
Yeah, so just to sort of add to that, I think when we say failure is an option, what we actually mean is failure is an option on a path to success. End goal is still success.
Failure is the only path to success.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what it means. Right?
Yeah,
so failure is not the end goal.
Yeah, I think we've heard that said many different times, and I think if we struggle with it in this room, how we take responsibility for curating that conversation outside this room becomes exponentially more important. That maybe of all the things on here, that's something to maybe draw out as a crystallization that we have a responsibility here, which is great. Right.
So let me just say what I stood up to say.
Yeah, great. We can give you another mic.
So I just wanted to give you my takeaways from the panel on computational thinking yesterday. So I was paying close attention to that panel. So the main key takeaway from me was, at the end of the panel, there was this question. We talk about computational thinking, we talk about computer science, we talk about programming. Are they two things or three things, or what is our terminology? So my takeaway towards that was that there are really two things, computer science and programming. Clearly, programming is part of computer science, and there is more to computer science than just programming, okay? And, Brian's view was that, computational thinking is one way of promoting computer science to everybody. People who may not necessarily care for computer science. Computational thinking is just a way of explaining to them that computer science is still relevant to them as a life skill, okay? So that was the high-level takeaway that I had from that panel. And that was my takeaway. Okay. So I wanted to share with you some of the work that Mike Geneseth and I are doing, which falls in the space of what is in computer science over and above programming. Okay, and at the broadest level, it is discrete math. Okay, so discrete math is, I think, core to computer science, and it's a way of thinking and approaching computer science which is fundamental to what makes a person a computer scientist. Just being able to code doesn't make you a computer scientist until you actually learn discrete math. And in the high school curriculum, the role of calculus is very well established because calculus is relevant to physics. You can't be a good physicist unless you learn calculus. Similarly, unless you learn discrete math, you cannot be a computer scientist. And Mike and I believe that just like calculus is taught at high school, we ought to be teaching people discrete math, and our particular angle to that is that we should be teaching people logic. And the reason why we believe that logic is important to, well, first of all, logic is important to computer science because logic is discrete math. It is the math of computer science, right? If we are going to teach people computer science, we have to be giving them the math skills that are necessary to succeed in computer science. But more broadly, logic is relevant to our everyday life. Logic teaches you how to think clearly. If you are understanding political arguments, you are analyzing computer arguments, you are debating, logic helps you with that. If you are taking LSAT, you are going to law school, logic helps you with that. So, and we believe that logic is important to computer science, but it is also more important. It is also important more broadly to art majors, science majors, and we are developing a course which we like to make it available at high school level across to all students whether they are reading CS or whether they are not going to major in CS.
Thank you. So I think we have about 5 minutes left or so. So maybe if anybody else has comments, if you could maybe keep them to like a minute or so each, just so we make sure to get everyone who wants to
so we can
contribute.
kite them. Yeah.
And people who haven't spoken will get
Yeah.
the mic first also. So we're good. Yeah.
Okay, well, I was going to respond to you, Cynthia. So I agree with you in reality, or in practice, or like theory, that standards-based instruction in computer science is not the best thing. So we want students to be creative, we want them to explore and like come away with things. But I'd say like my reality-mindedness and working for a school district is like, that's impractical. And that the people in charge of education necessitate standards to say that it is like something real that students should learn in the school day. So I'll say 2 other reasons why I think standards are important. One is teachers don't know what to teach, and we're assuming that like they can pick up on and then know how to use or guide students if they're creatively exploring. And the second thing is like the issue of equity. If we say that you can teach computer science and we don't say what computer science is, then we will have students in more marginalized settings learning Microsoft Office and calling computer science.
As they are today.
And they'll remain stuck in the shallow end. And so I think like that is raising the baseline of saying like students will have this. And I think that can still be taught in a creative way.
Well, I think you're mixing things up a bit, because ISTE says you should learn Microsoft Office skills, okay? So, but I want to get back to discrete math. Discrete math is fine. It is not essential for high school students to have discrete math to be involved in computer science. I know many programmers who are excellent programmers who didn't take a discrete math course, and nor did they take a logic course. Programming involves logical thinking. One does not necessarily, that's a discussion I had with Mike, and now I know who you're talking about. I didn't know, it's Mike Genesareth, who's a professor and teaches logic at Stanford. Well, of course he would think logic was necessary. That for a college, he can decide that. For high school, and certainly for elementary school, programming is sufficient to demand logical thinking. You can't program without logical thinking. And debugging, everybody debugs in a computer science environment. I don't know any computer scientist that talks about failure. They all talk about bugs. The whole life is spent debugging. Nobody is put under the pressure of failure. When kids do poorly in school, I sit down with them and say, what can we do? Where are the bugs? And they start thinking about it. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm going to echo a little bit what Cynthia said, but I definitely think logic and problem solving is the key theme with youngsters, but in the context of building stuff. I think when you build stuff, you learn that. I think if you try to teach a discrete math to most high school students or offer that course, they would get scared. But if you called the course, let's develop some software, and you learn a bunch of discrete math, you kind of fool them, right, into learning that. I think that's a key. The other point I want to make is, I think a big challenge for teachers at the middle school, high school level is they have very little coding knowledge, and they're trying to teach this hard thing, and they feel comfortable if given students tutorials that are very instruction based, and that's probably the worst thing they could really do. But they're scared because they can't answer all the questions the students have. But I think the key is teaching teachers that it's okay not to know all the answers, and that you have to be a facilitator and not a teacher. But that's a huge challenge, and I think that's the biggest challenge for what we're trying to do do here.
Teresa has the mic next.
We work with young teachers, and one of the things we always tell them the first day of young teacher class is, let's repeat it together. I don't know, let's find out together. Say that again. I don't know, let's find out together. That's safe and it's great, and young teachers need to know that.
Great. Teresa has the mic next.
Okay, so I'm not a computer scientist, so this might change the conversation a bit. I'm a historian. But I just want to get the word ethics up there, because one thing that I'm thinking a lot about is I just think we need to have more conversations with youth and learners about why we make what we make. Maybe if you can make it, should you, and what impact it has on the larger society, and contextualizing that in the history of what we have defined as progress, which has been constructed by groups. I just think it's such an important conversation, and something that we need to make sure we're weaving into all the conversations about computer science and making.
I'd like to respond. If we just maybe, there are a few people that okay.
Sure. For disclosure, I'm Dave Reed. I'm actually chair of the CSTA board. And I guess there's some discussions come up. I would really like to encourage people in this room to look at the CSTA standards. So they're in revision right now. I'm kind of surprised with your reaction, Cynthia, because and maybe there's some confusion with some other ones. I mean, certainly at the K2, K5, I think you'll find that they're very sort of general. Students, the familiarity with an algorithm, the idea of using a computer as some way of communicating. I understand sort of a reaction that standards can sometimes turn into checkboxes type of thing, but I think they're, especially at the K5, K8 level, what we hear is that teachers need some idea. They need some guidance because they're not computer science teachers. They're teaching something else. And so having sort of fairly general statements on, these are things that you really should be thinking about integrating into your classes, so that students are maybe a little bit interested, they're a little bit more prepared when they get later into the education to be able to do some of the more creative, some of the sort of building types of things. So I would love it if people would take a look. We certainly are looking for feedback. There's forums online. If you go to csteachers.org, you can find links for it. But we would love to get everyone's perspective and make those the best that we can make them.
So one of the things that I'm hearing as we're that seems to be a common theme underlying many of the sort of takeaways and observations is around this idea of the importance of equity and inclusion, right? Whether we're talking about thinking about standards or assessment, CS for all, there is this common underlying theme. So I'd love to kind of open it up to see if there's anybody who has anything to share with regards to what you think would make a big difference, or something that you've done in your community or within your organization that speaks to and tries to address this question and challenge around equity and inclusion. So I think, Melinda, one of the things that given the work that you do specifically, if you had any thoughts around this question of things that can be done, or things that maybe you're doing with your organization around equity and inclusion, when we talk about computer science, but also making as a pathway for engaging a much broader, diverse, inclusive group of students in STEM, arts, and design.
Yeah, I think a lot of points have kind of come up throughout the conversation that kind of get to this a little bit. That there's a continuum in areas of the country and in areas of our cities and towns. There are definitely places where where kids don't have access in the schools to computer science education, and there are quite a few kind of alternative routes for them, and a lot of representatives of those organizations here that are, Black Girls Code. We saw Kim Bryant yesterday. There's a bunch of them that are kind of less within the system and more outside of the system. And actually, Alex Tabany and I were talking. Alex is right here in the second row. We're talking yesterday about how. Some of the things that we're hearing is that with computer science education for underrepresented people specifically, we are often just not even trying to go through the normal public school system. We're actually just, the purpose is to go around it because we can't fix it. And I think there's a dichotomy in this, even in this room, of organizations that they've kind of given up on the system and they're going around it, and organizations that are trying to fix it within. And I think one of the things that we can do in this group is to really figure out how can we work together, because there is a public school system and it's broken. How can we all work together to start to fix that for underrepresented kids in particular? And when we talk about underrepresented kids, just so that we're clear, we're not just talking about women, we're not just talking about girls, we're also talking about ethnicity and race and socioeconomic status, disability. Alex has a great program specifically working on bringing people into the tech space who have disabilities. We have to kind of broaden the discussion even about what it is that we mean when we say diversity, to include ability, to include in the broader sense, to include veterans and age as well in the tech space.
Okay.
So I think one more thing that we're finding is that on the end of the education spectrum, we're talking about the skills gap a lot. There's also an opportunity gap, and it's not enough to bring kids all the way through the system and then not get them into that jump into the workforce. So there's also a need for people in education to really work on the corporate side as well in tech and make sure that the biases and that the opportunities are there, that the biases are broken down, and we really refine how the corporate space is looking at what a qualified applicant is. Because right now we're losing a lot of underrepresented people that go all the way through the pipeline and then never get jobs in tech. So, and then once they get into tech, it's not an inclusive space for them, so they leave and they go to other industries. So there's also something there that I think that we really need to start to address.
Is there maybe comment from anyone who hasn't had the mic yet?
There you go. Bam.
Wait.
Jesse Jackson's done great work to try to make that transparent and try to push that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make a comment about the computer science and the education system, and there's a couple points. I feel like one, that we need to move faster as a whole in terms of I get that we need to really get this right, but we need to move faster in terms of the STEM, the core curriculum, what we're going to add to the school system, because technology is moving that fast. It's not, the industry is not waiting, right? And then we do need to have some set of core curriculum, some standards, because in the public system especially, because, for example, we have programs like Kim's, the Black Girl Code. There's programs in New York, there's San Francisco, you name it, all across the country that's working with your school, working with youth on their own, probably nonprofits or independently funded. And they're exposing kids to computer science type education or logic or robotics on their own. And then there's nothing else for these kids to, if it's like, when they come in a weekend and the code and then they leave, then there's nothing else to follow on. The parents are not equipped sometimes they are. And it's not like all 8th graders across America is at the same level. So America, the system needs to move faster. These independent organizations need more funding because the industry as a whole is like, now the industry is funding artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. You go to the kids in Atlanta, some kids in New York, some kids in Chicago, they have no clue what that is or the value of it, and the fact they're actually maybe using it with Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook and how it affects their behavior. And we getting generations behind our technology is touching kids in different demographics across the country. So we need to move extremely faster. We need to make decisions and test, right? We had a great conversation at dinner Wednesday night about, what that should look like, those courses, what is programming, what is computer science. We need a pilot, we need a test, we need to evolve. And then on the other note, we need to be careful and be mindful of the privatization of education. We see some of it with the charter schools in the Bay Area. I know Alt School is here. I don't know the logistics about Alt School. There's people work there, but I know it's probably funded. Then those kids in Alt Schools have a certain access and privileged education. And it's going to be pipelined to opportunities that other kids, even in Oakland or even here in San Francisco, that we learned recently that San Francisco youth, 80 to 90% are in poverty level. The kids right here in San Francisco, innovation capital of the world. So if that's the case, and some kids don't have broadband, don't have tablets, don't have access, and we're talking about there's a talent shortage, we're talking about an education problem, how can we fix and work with the kids here to get them prepared for the jobs and the opportunities in the future? So I think we need to move faster. We need more capital for privatized or organizations that's still going to educate and fund the youth. And for the public education system, that needs to, whatever we're going to do, let's make it happen. Test in 2 years, test in 1 year, pilot in school here, pilot in school here, and pilot it in different demographics across America, because every single demographic and ecosystem has different youth, different perspectives. Everybody doesn't use the same technology, use the same, play the same games, have the same access.
Thank you for that perspective.
Can I just I just
Okay.
want to react really quickly, if that's okay, to your point about Jesse Jackson. And I just want to say that, yes, there is advocacy being done here and work being done in a number of ways to really change the corporate space. But what I was really addressing is something that's not happening, which is that the computer science programs and the people in education are not talking with and learning and understanding what's needed in the corporate workplace enough. There is not enough communication there. That I actually believe that both the higher ed programs and the coding schools and boot camps really need to be working together with the corporate recruiters and diversity and inclusion people to better define what that is, what that skills gap is that they're seeing, and to better define what they should be looking for on the corporate space. So there's something missing there right now.
Okay, so our last comment, but we hope that these conversations, we actually are a bit tight on time, but I just wanted to say that we hope that these last conversations that we do have, we can continue to have offline and hopefully in the communities that you all are doing great work in. So our last comment is going to come from Reagan, who herself is an educator, and just to provide a little bit of...
That's not a nice thing to say.
Oh, I was just saying that Reagan is an educator and to provide an additional perspective as an educator.
I think that, so a lot of the things being talked about with standards and the testing and the needs for what we need to prepare our students for whether it's the jobs or higher ed, I think it comes back to a couple things that I heard, one from Adam this morning, and then another what I heard from Temple Grandin a few weeks ago is we just need to be able to empower teachers and hold in the forefront that we're teaching kids. It's not necessarily about the content, and we need to be able to uphold the skills that they do have instead of trying to find the skills that they don't have. And then we also need to make sure that we're providing access. You know, the computer science and this is a very critical thing for our workforce. So for us, it's how do we help our students grow in these areas, and then also grow in areas that they really are passionate about. We have to do the testing. We have to. Those are things that our students learn, that these are going to be things in life that we have to do. But if we can empower teachers in the setting, and we've done this by creating our school in the public school district, which is very rare to see. But we don't have to run our culture that way every day. We can leave interesting things around, and see what they do with them. And we can put things out there that have kids explore the areas that we're talking about. And I think if we coach them and nudge them along and we bring our own passions in there, we're going to meet the standards. We know what they are, we're educated, we can work kids to get there, but it's about interests, it's about teaching that kid, and I think that we're going to accomplish a lot of the goals that people are talking about in here, whatever sector that we're in.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.